Real Digital Humans.
Hi, and welcome to the Real Digital Humans podcast. Here we talk about the why, how, and when digital humans will completely transform our lives, how it will change our life, work, how we learn, and how we play. Today, the podcast is sponsored by Asia Digital Humans, and today I, Stefan Albert, will be your host. Now, every episode, we like to focus on one special area and have an expert guest with us. And today we have Doron Themans here with us, and we'd like to talk about the shift from traditional chatbots to digital humans. Now, Doron is an expert in conversational AI and innovation. He's invested in a bunch of startups in the space, has been a consultant as well in the area and delivered many projects himself. He also has a podcast that I participated in, also discussing digital humans. So with that little intro, let's pass over to you, Doron. Doron, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Stefan. And of course, you were also a guest on my podcast. So we're reversing it now. Yeah, well, you gave a great introduction of my activities. And we do see in the field a lot of stuff happening. The developments and the request of working with AI is I would say crazy. And you probably recognize that. Everybody's asking for it and nobody has a clue what it does. But it's hip and happening. So we're actually not trying, we're integrating that into the way we work, but we're also very careful because we all know the inherent problems with AI. Everybody's running into that. And there's not that many proper solutions around. Right?
Yep. It's a minefield out there.
It is. And as far as we know, the traditional chatbots are a thing. And I think AI is going to help us making a huge leap fast to innovative expansions on that. And I think digital humans is one of those examples that will allow us to make a chatbot more human, if we could say that. And I can imagine a lot of instances where that can be and will be of great value. So yeah, I see a great future for digital humans. And I imagine that is also why you invited me.
Absolutely. But also, you've got quite a number of years of experience in the more traditional chatbots behind you. And I think what would be lovely for today is to take the listeners a little bit through the journey of, great traditional chatbots, how things are changing today, and how this could develop into great chatbots in the future, and also pave the way also for great digital humans, which in many ways is a chatbot as a basis, plus this, the voice and the look and feel of having a real human there, although it's a digital human, and how these will combine to create even better digital humans in the future. Well, so maybe one question to start with: you've done many different projects, and you must have come across some really interesting, surprising results during your past work. What are one or two really surprising things around chatbots that you'd like to share?
Well, there's two sides to that. There's the positive ones. And as you're well aware, we test a chatbot in the podcast. And there's also quite a few negative ones. And I'll start with the positive ones. In some of the projects, we were amazed to see where we assumed that the elderly generation would not be very lenient to use a chatbot for whatever reason. And we brought it out there. And to our surprise, because we do a lot of research, we found out that they're the most enthusiastic of that specific chatbot, the most enthusiastic user group. And they are fully comfortable using it, no problems. They go through it like a knife through butter, real easy. So that was surprising because we assumed that not having a person on the phone or writing an email with a lot of information, or literally someone visiting if it is about insurance. No, it was actually real easy and convenient. And they were actually asking, can't we do everything like this? Which is interesting and teaches you that you should not assume, never assume that you know, because you don't. And testing is actually the secret to success. And you will fail while you test, but don't assume you know. Just test and ask and talk to the people who are using it or should be using it. That's one positive success. The other positive is that what I find is that we've done projects where everybody uses chatbots inbound, right? They put it on the website or behind the login or even in apps. And we've turned in projects the paradigm around, going from an inbound chatbot where you wait and you have no clue what the customer is going to ask you, and you send something to the customer, you invite them to have a conversation with you. And that means as a company, you're in control of the conversation. You want something from the customer. And if you make that conversation an amazing experience, actually the customer is really lenient to converse with you in the chatbot, etc. And there is something where I would imagine that a digital human could play even a bigger role to make that even easier and better and more accessible, because it feels more human. So that's a positive, and that's where I see opportunity. On the negative side, I see a lot of companies sort of playing around with AI and getting unpredictable results. And that is, in my opinion, a thing, because once you give a customer an unpredictable result that is wrong or off topic, or it says a million times, I don't understand you, because it wasn't built well or programmed well, whatever you want to say, then you lose the customer for that channel. And you have a great channel and a great opportunity to go from a conversation to a process, to take the customer to either buy something or do an administrative process. But you lose the customer for that channel, and you also lose the opportunity to have that gain in your cost and productivity, or efficiency, if you will, to take a repetitive task away from your employees and create more time for commercial activities or complex tasks. And my worry is there that these negative experiences, there's way too many chatbots out there that companies thought, oh, let's make it a huge project. We invest a lot of money. We use all the tech we can find. And they actually made it too big. And so it would fail. And then customers are not happy. It's being used a little or not too much. And then usually the executive will say, oh, the project has failed. Let's quit, or let's stop doing it, or let's stop investing. And I find that that's a pity. And I think companies or conversation designers or departments should understand that they should start small, make the use case small, and start with not the most complex tech, de-risk it and make it stable and reliable with a predictable outcome. And then you can start building and innovating on that. And that's also how I would approach to go to a digital human. First, start understanding what the customer wants and needs, have a stable conversation, and then build on that, expand on that. Because once you have that, then it's relatively easy to introduce a digital human as an extra layer of service.
Yeah, and I mean, I've come across these same discussions as well with businesses. You know, like, okay, this is exciting. How can we get everything done? And you're like, well, okay, like, you know, one step at a time. You know, let's choose something which is maybe lower risk, high value, but you know, easy to put borders on, and say, you know, let's just deliver this one thing really well, and then move on to the next step and add things along. And I think a lot of what I've also learned from, I think there's the Conversation Design Institute in the Netherlands as well. You know, even just for normal chatbots, they always do that. And of course, with a digital human, you don't only have the chatbot piece you have to work on, you have also the digital human piece. So there's an extra layer of complexity. So you really want to lock down on that, you know, that simplicity and that focused early on to really get that, you know, early user insights and successes.
And there's one thing that intrigues me, and it's very difficult to get that in chatbots. And there's a few examples where I've seen it done really, really well. And in some instances, it's not that important, but it's the voice of the brand. And I think that's where digital humans could make a huge difference, because in a text-based or even voice-based chatbot, it is really hard to brand, to actually give you the experience the brand wants you to have, or you should have, according to the brand values. And I think digital human giving the brand a face, sort of what you expect if you have an advisor, or you go to a store, or you have a video call with a real person. I think that in some instances could make a huge difference in terms of what kind of experience you have and what you expect as a consumer or client. So yeah, I think that's where digital humans could and should make the difference.
That's a really interesting point. There's some research that was recently done with the University of St. Gallen, looking at what are some of the drivers behind digital humans, where they're the most effective. And one of the things that they found is people just understand them better. They get it, and they get a lot more, I think, than what you intended to give. So if you intended to, give a few facts or a really easy process, that's one thing that you intend to give. But you also give your brand, you share your values, you do all of these things without even thinking about it. So a lot more information is being passed, and usually it's difficult to control how people will take that on. And of course, with a digital human, there's so much more information, and people are used to absorbing it in a conversation with someone that represents an organization, a brand, or their own personal brand. I think that's really critical, that that it aligns more closely with how people see the world.
I didn't see that research, but it's an interesting thought. If you look at how people learn, and of course you get people that are auditive, that they use their just sound to learn, and there's people that are visual, so they need to see. For instance, some people read or read, so some people read a book and they'll remember, but the next person will see a movie and will remember much better, and the third person will need an audio book to remember. But most people need a combination. And this is where the interesting part is. If it's a chatbot, it's just text. If it's a voice bot, it's just sound. If it's a digital human, especially if it's sort of transcribed in the conversation, then it's all three. Yep. So, and the transcribing is not really the human part, but it sort of aligns with a different thing in our brain. And I'm not sure which part of our brain, but from the research I've seen about how people learn, this is really an interesting way of making a different impression than just a regular chatbot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole 7-38-55 rule, if I get that right, from Albert Mehrabian. Very famous research paper, but often used out of context and too widely. But the fact is, you always understand more if you go from pure text to text and voice to text, voice, and body language and face. And they say 7% is what you get purely from the words. Then 38% is then purely from the sound, and the remaining 55% is purely from the visuals. So really, the visuals being probably the most important of all of these. But I really believe there's some other magic that happens in the combination, because for survival we need to is this someone I can trust? Is he telling me the truth, etc.? And you get that by combining all of those three elements, in particular the face.
You know what would be really interesting research? They use MRIs, live MRIs, to see what happens in the brain if you show pictures or something to people. It would be really interesting to see the difference in a live MRI between a text bot, a voice bot, and a digital human. And I would be really interested to see the results. And I wouldn't be surprised that the impact of the digital human is much higher than one of the other versions.
Yep. I would firmly support that argument. Let's get that research done. Do you know any doctors?
Well, it's not about doubt. You need I think it's fairly expensive research because you need an MRI machine, a lot of time, and
Mhm.
you need analysis capacity to understand what actually happens in the brain, and maybe you put electrodes on. I don't know, but it would be interesting to. I think there's psychological departments or neurological departments you can ask to. Maybe the University of St. Gallen has a department like that and does that kind of research, as they do with, I don't know, pictures of people. That's how they say why do we like a certain type of person better than the other, and they can see that in the scans. I don't know. It's just a thought, but I'd be interesting to see, and I think that would be scientific proof of how our brain responds to the different versions.
Hey, great thoughts. And now we're sort of on this theme of, like, where digital humans can work best. So obviously, there's this question around comprehension. There's this question around, obviously automation. At the end of the day, it's a way to automate. The way I like to simplify it often in like client conversations is it's where you need both the automation of, let's say, a chatbot, but you also need that natural human connection from, let's say, a face-to-face or a video conference type meeting. Now, maybe first, based on your experience, where do you think that the digital humans versus the more traditional chatbots would really come and provide the most value? And then maybe a couple of use cases, perhaps from your time in financial services or other areas where you see this would make the most sense.
Um, Let me say, one of the things, this comes from frustration. There's so many websites out there where you need to do a process or do something, and they've made it's designed by developers, not by UX designers or people who actually have gone through the process a gazillion times to understand that the way they design it is actually not very customer friendly or user friendly, and it needs explanation. And then have all this text explaining what you need to do. And now they've already improved in some instances where there's a chatbot, but there's still a lot of text. Same story. And why isn't there a digital human then that pops up and says, "Oh, you want me to walk you through the steps in the website?" And where the digital human, I haven't seen it, but I would love to have it, where the digital human actually puts a face to the process, where I don't have to call customer service like, how the hell does this work? Your website is shitty, but the digital human walks me through it step by step. It could show me a video, could talk to me, I could type, I could talk, whatever I want. And basically, it would be really convenient where I type actually in the process, and I could talk to the digital human, getting help during the process. And basically, I'd be multitasking and getting help. That for me, that would be an interesting development. Technically, it's possible, not easy, but I think that would be a great improvement in a lot of websites. A lot of government websites could actually use that because they don't make it easy on the civilians, as I would say. That's one use case I would love to see out there. And another one is that would be more in the medical field, because what I see is that doctors, I speak to a lot of doctors, generally they're overworked. They get too many patients, too many administrative tasks. And a part of what they do, especially the specialists, people don't understand, they have repetitive tasks. So let's say you have a lung doctor, a lung specialist, right? And he or she has patients with asthma. Basically, the explanation of how to use the medication, right? They have, probably in 80% of the cases, they prescribe the same medication. And in 20%, it's different. So why don't they spend the 20% actually telling these people how to use it, what it's for, and the other 80% they could save so much time to help these people through how to use the medication, but also to be loyal to the therapy, because that's part of the problem why they come back to the hospital is because they're not loyal through the therapy. So why don't you use a digital human to sort of, how should I say this positively, influence me as a consumer or as a patient in a positive way to stay loyal to therapy, ask any question that I have, and not from that I go through the digital human. No, the digital human approaches me. How is it going? Are you okay? Is it working? Does it have the desired effect? Are you loyal to the therapy? And I think there it could have a huge impact. I mean, seriously, huge impact, not only in cost, but also on the quality of life of our doctors, because we're wearing them out. And so, yeah, that's those are use cases I see, and I think they're actually possible.
I mean, I love how you brought out these two specific use cases. These are two areas that I've been having
For
some
the
great.
viewers, we didn't prepare this, right?
No, absolutely. Uh, I've just had multiple conversations last week with some Swiss public servants looking at how, some of their more complex forms that need to be filled in could be supported by having a digital human that will help explain to them all of the bits and pieces that are really kind of complicated. I'm not sure if it's like this everywhere. I know in Australia, for example, we have less reliance on documentation. So if you're in the system, you're kind of in the system, and then you have a passport, you're kind of there. That's it.
All your
Whereas in
data is in there.
if you if you want to apply for something, then you need this document, and you need to get this proof of where you live, and this needs to come from this department, and then you need to get this proof of where you're from, which should be
And they
obvious.
have all the data. That's the weird thing in their systems.
You need to get a copy of these documents very often, and it's just sort of a very painful step. And if you have people that haven't maybe moved around within the country a lot, have never had to deal with it for first timers. It's not just for foreigners, even and they're only talking about locals in particular. It really is a huge challenge.
There's one thing about that, though. I think before you put in a digital human or a chatbot, for that matter, you should be critical of the actual process, because that's one of the things companies do, and it really pisses me off, is that they have a horrible process, and then they want to build a chatbot or a voice bot or a digital human around it, instead of simplifying the process first. They try to take that complex process, which very often is not necessary to have it this complex, but we've always done it this way. You recognize this, and then try to automate that. But you need to take a step back, simplify the process, then automate, make it a great experience, and then you can add the digital human or the chatbot or what have you to that process to help make it even better. But if you don't simplify the process, no chatbot, no digital human can solve that complexity.
They can't. So they can maybe make it a bit easier. And in certain cases, I think for companies where they have the full flexibility to change things, in-house, there's no excuse. Government agencies, I think, even though many would love to, they have a whole long history of baggage that they just have to deal with. And
legislation.
It might be a 10-year process to actually change a specific process, but it could be a 10-day process or a 10-week process to create something that will make it that much easier for users to manage. So, I see where you're coming from, and that's usually it's like version 1.0 of creating a good process is to fix the process before you automate it.
Exactly.
In some cases, you have less flexibility.
I'm realistic. In some cases, you can't, but it's also a lot of people are stuck in this process of thinking. And see, I have this idea that you have people that think. You have people that think in a box. You have people that think outside the box, and there's people that think without a box. I'm one of those people that doesn't think with a box. I don't want a box. It's possible until proven impossible. And a lot of times you see that government agencies think within a box, or they just think, and then they can't see what's out there. And a lot of times I understand legislation prohibits, or you have to take these steps. I understand that's it. We have to comply. And then I'm pretty sure a digital human or a chatbot can help and make life a little bit easier. But at the same time, it shouldn't stop you from scrutinizing over your process and see where you can make it
How
simpler.
far?
Or yeah,
How far can you take it?
exactly. And actually, a chatbot forces you. This is the great thing about chatbots. It is like a huge mirror. Also, a digital human. It forces you to scrutinize your process because you're in shock at what you have to make, the conversation sometimes you have to make in order to go through the process. Like, why do we even have this step? And then you find out it's actually not necessary, or we have the data. Why don't we retrieve it from a database, make life so much easier, and just confirm that it's the correct data? A lot of times we have people type stuff, but we know already.
Well, this is one of the beauties, I think, of digital humans. It forces you to have a really long, hard think about what's important. Now, already chatbots, you see all of the complexity come out. So, if you got they ask you to fill in a 4-page form, A4, you'd be amazed how many questions actually there are. And if you try and build that into a chatbot, it would already start to, let's say, not work anymore because it's just too much back and forth. A real human would never want to do that. So then you start trying to simplify and you try and make it something which a digital human where you can read the text and all that efficiently. Now, one guy I was speaking to recently, Barry, he's a speech expert. And he was saying that people read typically about 10 times faster than you can speak. So, it has the advantage that you can go through lots of content. Often, maybe a bunch of it won't actually stick, but you can go through a lot. And so, filling in a form becomes easier. Doing a chatbot is more complicated because you have lots of terms, but it's still text, so it's still a bit easier. Once you then go to a digital human where you have a face, you have a voice, you have to wait for the person to speak and say what they're going to say, you suddenly start to realize how much content you're forcing people to read and regurgitate in a form. And a chatbot is already bad enough. Then you make it a digital human, it's about 10 times as bad again. And I think this is, this is really telling to why some things don't really work well in a conversation. I mean, usually the doctor really doesn't like it, or when you go to a surgery or your doctor's office and they have a form to fill in, and for some reason you can't do it yourself and they have to go through each question. Of course, they hate it because it takes them 15 minutes. You do it yourself, you can maybe do it in 5 minutes because you can just sort of skim through it and give the answers. And I think as we're going through these steps towards digital humans, we have to take this path of absolute simplicity and really getting those processes down to being, already predefined somehow, where the data is already there as much as possible, and they're just sort of guiding you for that last 10%.
I just realized one thing where I would love a digital human on my phone. It's not that I use it a lot, but let's say you in the weekend you need a doctor. In Holland, there's the rule that unless you're dying or bleeding out or whatever, you don't go call 911. You go call the GP, general practitioner central. Basically, in the weekend they're on call, and they combine it in one practice or one location, and you call them and they do triage. And the triage is really interesting because it's standardized. And it's really interesting. Why would I need a human since it's standardized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I would like is okay, if I would have a digital human on my phone talking to me, because it's a medical thing that is sort of, if I can talk, maybe my hand is hurting, so I can't type, right? It would be really convenient if I could talk. Now, if you would do it with speech, it's interesting enough, you could also do speech analysis. Now, we know from speech analysis that you could take out heart attacks and other problems, brain seizures, well, some other stuff. You could actually triage by just listening to the voice. Imagine that the digital human or the digital doctor's assistant says, well, I notice a certain vibration in your voice. I connect you to, I think an ambulance should come.
Yeah. I mean,
A
we used to
human
hear
is not capable. This is the interesting thing. A human is not capable of picking this up. These are small things in the voice. And this is the interesting part. I think triaging, medical triage, unless someone is actually dying, but please, people understand that, then you call 911. Probably the electronic version or a digital human with the technology behind it would be a much better source or much better connection, because also if it turns out to be something simple and in the triage tree you would end up say, oh, take a paracetamol and you're fine, it could look up all the things that the patient said and could make a combination from the data it probably has behind it. It's like, okay, this is interesting. No human can actually access that much data that fast. First of all, they didn't study for it. Second of all, they don't have access to that data. What if the digital human could access that, reproduce it, and take a decision? You to go left, you go right. I don't know. You need to talk to a human. That could also be the case.
Yeah.
I think you'd have an amazing innovation, and it's 24/7 available. You could also use it during the week. It save a lot of cost, and I think people would actually get the care they need. And you could also do it in any language, which is also interesting. Then you don't have language problem. In Switzerland, you have a small challenge in terms of languages, right? It's French, Switzerland, German, Italian, and what else?
If most of the residents of this lovely country already didn't speak 3 languages or 4 languages. That's one way to solve it, but certainly it gets expensive because, you know, in Switzerland, I knew someone who was applying for a job and they got paid less than everyone else because they only spoke 2 languages.
Seriously. Oh, wow.
So,
That's
but
kind of shocking.
it means that you are being, you know, these things are there where they, you know, every skill comes at a cost. When I think about this, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, it's like, you know, what are the steps to get there? So here we're talking about a relatively standardized triage process. The next step would be to actually give advice
on the stuff that is not life threatening. I have to stress that.
Yep. But even to make that decision that it's not life threatening is a decision, a very important life threatening decision. So it already has a lot of risk. I'm not saying it can't and shouldn't be done, but obviously.
But you know, they already use in those triage posts, they already use decision support software where basically the man or the woman behind the telephone is, first of all, you have to wait as a patient because there's too many people calling. That's one. If you're in pain or your child is in pain and you want to get someone on the phone, it's really frustrating. That's one. But it's not sick enough to call 911. Secondly, they already use a decision support system in order to, where they ask a question, the system tells them what question to ask, they enter it, and then they get an answer. So there is already data available in terms of decision trees, but there's no further data behind that because it's hard to access, and the human cannot combine all that. And if you would have to enter as a human, as the in-between, all that data, you can't type fast enough. What if you make a typo? So there is a ton of reasons to not cut them out of the loop, but to connect all these systems or use the information, the knowledge that's already out there. I don't think you would introduce more risk. According to the FDA, it's actually a medical device, interestingly enough. But I don't think you would introduce more risk. I would assume you de-risk it because it always follows the same protocol. There's no human emotion involved. And if there's emotion in the voice of the person, the system can actually filter it. If you train it enough, it can analyze what kind of emotion is it. Is it fear? Is it pain? What is it?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it is. Well, it's not simple, but it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I think there's probably some steps that we could implement much more easily down that path. One of I think you mentioned it before, saying that a doctor's life is often repetitive. That, how do you explain how to use an inhaler? How do you explain what is it like to live with diabetes? I was speaking with an expert, and that used to be her job. And she just always highlighted how painful it was to have to literally, and it's not 5 minutes, you're talking about half an hour to an hour, maybe multiple visits, multiple discussions with everybody because everyone has the same questions. And how much of that could be done by a super patient digital human that has all that knowledge, can take them through the standard knowledge, really easily answer any question they have, any number of ways that they need it answered, as many times as they want to ask the question or different questions.
Here's the interesting
A
part.
lot of value there.
No, extremely. I have in my network quite a few doctors, also a few pediatricians, and one of them is a pediatrician specialized in allergies and lung diseases. And here's the interesting part: they have to explain to children over and over and over again. So every couple months or every year, either the doctor or the specialized nurse has to explain and check if the child does it. What if you could have a digital human record what the child is doing, analyze that, and we know it's technically possible, and then have the digital human say, oh, but you're holding the inhaler in the wrong way, or you need to shake it or whatever, and repeat it, because it's the repetition that actually makes the therapy loyalty work.
Yep.
It's
I like
repeating
that.
and doctors are doing this, and it's annoying because it's time. I wouldn't say wasted. That's not fair. It's time well invested for that specific patient. But if you do that times, I don't know, 1,000 patients a year, then sort of it seems like time wasted. If we could do it in a more efficient way, 24/7, you don't have to call the doctor at night. What do I do? So I think 80% of 80% of the patients get a repetitive message, and that 20% gets very specific stuff. And I think there's a big difference in the academic setting or in a regular hospital. Regular hospital, it's probably even more.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, if you look at, and I'm always amazed by the sort of statistics in most countries, healthcare is about 10 to 15% of the GDP.
Yeah,
At
shocking.
least in Western countries. I think Switzerland's about 12% at the moment.
And it's on the rise.
And it's on the rise. Actually, I believe it's coming down a little bit since COVID. It had a bit of a peak again during COVID, unsurprisingly, but I think it's somewhere around the 12% now. And people always want better care. So how are we going to continue to give better and better?
I have an idea. Isn't Switzerland the country with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, right? Big ones.
That it does, yes.
That it does. Well, what if the pharmaceuticals, instead of introducing, you're going to laugh at me, by the way, introducing, this stupid piece of paper inside the box of the medication. Yeah, they have it. And on that is a QR code, right? And that QR code links to a digital human explaining to that specific medication how to use it. And that would support the doctor. Wouldn't then you're writing down this idea, that pharmaceuticals, wouldn't they support the doctors even better and make their life easier? And at the same time, have the advantage that their medication is used properly and explained in any language with any question that could be asked, that can be answered. There's only so many questions you can ask. I think that would be a great innovation. And at some point, you could bring that together in one digital human. You just state which medication, or the QR code leads to that part of the conversation.
I mean, I think that's super interesting. Had lots of conversations with not around the medication itself, but around, let's say, testing of let's say blood testing and other self-testing methods. And of course, it's not just about how to take the medicine, which often pharmaceutical companies, you have to really find the details, because they actually don't want people looking at that themselves. They want the doctor to be telling them exactly what they need to do. But when you start having medical devices or test kits and so on, I don't know if you remember the first days of COVID, self-testing,
Oh,
and you're like,
stop. Am I deep enough in my nose? Not deep enough? Oh, the thing is too long. The thing is too short.
and you're just like, why don't they just have like, a code? You just scan the QR code and it comes up with a digital human or a video. I always would prefer the digital human because you say, hey, do you want me to take you through the process now? Yes. Should I give you a
And
1 minute
time it
demo?
for you.
Yes. Boom. Here's the thing. Okay, we're now going to head off. You click start when you're ready to go. Boom. I'm going to count to 45. Okay, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Okay, 45 seconds. Now take it out. Do this. It would be so much more natural and more easy
You're a couple of
than,
years late.
yeah. I mean, that is true.
Shit
That all
happens,
came
huh?
out rather quickly here. But I think there's a lot of space for this, and there's a lot of readiness for this now. The world is
Yeah.
digitalized also thanks to COVID.
And I think the shortage of qualified staff who is actually, but there's another thing. If you have staff that is tired, let me start explaining this in a different way. In Israel, they did an experiment with judges. Or I didn't experiment with judges. That sounds horrible. But they did an experiment a while ago. They looked at the outcomes of different court cases. Same type of court cases, but how was it ruled? And when was the ruling done? Was it in the morning, before lunch, or in the afternoon, after lunch, late in the afternoon? And they found out that the same cases, rulings in the morning, when people were still fresh and energetic and blah, 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 were different after lunch. So here's the interesting thing. How fair is that? And I think that the information you give, if you have given the talk 20 times that day, if you're number 21, you're screwed. Because no, seriously, the person in front of you is not going to be lenient to give you all the information. They're going to forget details or have no patience for you or what have you. And I really think that patients and medical professionals could benefit from, okay, you could sit people down in a room. It's like, okay, our AI assistant or digital human is going to walk you through it. I'll come in after you've seen if you've talked with her or with him. And if you have any more questions, you can ask it to me if you want to do it in a hospital. I can imagine that would be first up, do it in a hospital, and then later on move it towards the home or use that same digital human to contact that person and say, oh, let's have a chat. How are you doing? Is the medication working? How are you feeling? Blah, 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 blah. And get data. And it's exactly what you said. People are lenient to give, if it's a recognizable face, could even be an avatar of the doctor, him or herself, asking the questions, and it's a face you would probably give the answers, honestly.
Yep. Yeah. And there is that evidence we've discussed. I think for the listeners out there, Doron and I, we've discussed the whole medical case. I think for multiple hours. I think we've had 4 to 8 plus hours discussion on this, debates about applicability and how and where it could make sense, and also about some of the findings that we've seen. I think there's quite a few papers already out there now highlighting that digital humans have a better, people share more information with digital humans than they do with real humans. And how
That's
can
already
we
true
use
for regular chatbots.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's you just got to take the real human out of the picture and things get better. And
digital humans or chatbots, data or AI even, it doesn't judge. If people want to tell about some stupid or annoying or shameful physical problem, it doesn't judge you. I can imagine, I've never had this, but I can imagine someone with a venereal disease talking about that can be sort of a painful experience. Not the disease itself, maybe also, but the experience talking about it comes with shame. And if you take out the shame factor and people are more comfortable giving that information or talking to someone or something early on in the process, healthcare costs would go down, but it's also better for the people.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think we've sort of gone past like what are some of the use cases, and we you know, along the discussion we've mentioned already a whole bunch of different use cases. And I'd like to do two things. I'd like to think about, of all of these use cases that we've mentioned, that's why I was writing them down, which ones you would say are, you know, are really applicable because that, you know, they enable automation, they really meet that need for that human connection, and given the current state of technology are easy to implement. So I'd like to do that first, and then in a second step, think a little bit more about what the future of the evolution of digital humans is. So just as a quick recap, we discussed a bunch of use cases. One was basically having a host that would walk you through a website, explaining any questions that you might have. So if you know you have somewhere to fill in, you could just click on the ask help button instead of getting a little tab. The digital human would just go ahead and explain that little piece and give you any suggestions that you might need.
And you can type and talk at the same time, so you multitask, and it helps you in the process. And I think that so you don't have to switch where you type.
Yeah, it's all there on the same screen. It's you know, it just pops up. Then the second one was this whole medical piece. So, you know, starting with the repetitive tasks, explanations, let's say the simpler, easier, repetitive tasks that we need to do. And then going the next step, which would be, let's say, you know, supporting processes such as triage. Of course, then we can go the next step, and then we can go towards the process of giving advice, medical advice. And then adding to that, and maybe this for me, although it can be done today, I'd still put it in sort of this next step piece, really then integrating additional AI capabilities, such as, you know, analyzing the speech, you know, the way you cough to see if you got COVID or some other cough.
Or
I think
what,
there's out, by the way. There's some good research.
But also, if you have an Apple Watch or
Mm-hmm.
one of those watches,
Integrate it on
integrating
there.
that data into your where the digital human says, "Oh, I see your heart rate is up," or your temperature is higher. Imagine there's no human on the phone that can do that. Will ask you, "Did you take your temperature?" And you say, "No." It's not that you're going to stick a thermometer in your behind while you're on the phone. It's not going to happen. So I think if you understand that there are different digital platforms, and that digital human is the pivot point of bringing everything together, which is in essence, it's data, no more, no less. And I'm not saying you should do everything at once, but once you have it, you have the platform to jump on to the next and to the next and to the next. And I think this is where, if you ask me, the one that has, they're all important, they all could be useful. I would assume that that there's in the medical field, I would love to see it there. There's two things: the explanation. Basically, you could say it's explainer movies, but it's more than that. The therapeutic loyalty, explaining how to take medication, when to take it, and how is it going, collecting data, giving information. I think that's one, and it's relatively easy to implement because it's quite straightforward. That's the one thing, and forget about it's not giving advice, medical advice. It's just following protocol, and it's doing it better than any human can. Let's be honest. And
Certainly
that's
more,
one. Sorry.
certainly more patiently. They have more patience than you have.
More patiently, no, but it collects the facts. It doesn't have a bias about the facts. The facts are the facts, and it takes, based on the facts and the protocols it's got, it takes a decision. That's exactly how the medical world works. They medicate and they treat according to protocols. So there's no difference there. If you follow the protocol, and it can't go off protocol, because the thing, a human can go off protocol. So if it's 100% on protocol, there's not, you're not wrong. You're not doing anything. And the other thing is, I think the triaging part, if you would start off with digital humans there, doing slowly, starting small, but imagine you're on vacation and you want to talk to your GP. You just have a simple question. It could be on your phone. And I think that is another field where it should start and then expand to a lot more. But you have to start somewhere, and I think the medical world could strongly benefit. Well, actually, patients would also benefit from the first of all the quality, and second of all the and consistency and the convenience and the productivity profit, as I would say. There's more time available, either to have time off or to spend on other patients that actually need the care.
Yep. I mean, you bring up one really interesting point, is the benefit is there. Often the challenge that I've been seeing is who's going to pay for that benefit. And if you
the $1,000,000 question
before, it becomes super challenging. So you speak to the insurance companies, they're like, well, we don't really have anything to do with that. Like, we outsource everything, let's say, to the hospitals and the doctors. You go to the hospitals and you say, well, we've got this great thing that will make everything more efficient. And they're like, well, we don't really care about that because we just get paid for the work that we do. And then you go to the individuals and then it's like, well, we're not going to pay for it because that's why we pay for insurance, or we have state insurance, depending on the model. So it's really hard to work out who actually should pay for it. Now, of course, I think, in many ways, the benefits could go all the way back if the regulation was to allow for that, to the insurance companies. But the requirement for some of these things to actually work is that they get implemented, for, let's say, at a clinic which supplies all of the insurance companies. So it wouldn't make sense to invest it just for one insurance company who is backing it. You actually need then all the insurance companies to back it. So it ends up getting a little bit lost in this sort of, who pays and who benefits. And it's very hard to kind of, it's like the squeezing the balloon. You try and find out, where the air is and try and squeeze if there's any air, and it goes and it sort of sends you somewhere else. I think this is one of the big challenges with the very complex regulatory system we have in medical.
I tend to agree. However, if I go back to the start of COVID in the Netherlands, in Holland, we had the rule that insurance companies, and I hope I'm stating this right, insurance companies wouldn't pay for a digital consultation of doctors in Holland. So if you would have a digital consult and that would be registered as such, you would not get paid. And literally, when COVID started and, everything had to be done from a distance as much as possible, in some instances they couldn't, all of a sudden, within 2 days, they were able to first temporarily change the regulation. All of a sudden, it was possible. It was never possible. It wasn't right. Blah, 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 blah. 2 days, they changed it.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, but it tells us something. It's not about if is it possible, it's do we want it? And there were mumbo jumboing, and before that about a scientific proof. Here's the problem: you want to innovate. It's impossible to scientifically prove the innovation unless you do it at scale. There's tons of examples where they innovated in the medical field, and they haven't done it at scale, and then they say it's not enough proof. It might work, but it's not enough proof. So the only way to do that is do it at scale. So there are countries in the world where they understand that the only way to get through that mumbo jumbo is to do it at scale. So it needs to be relatively safe. But if we have de-risked it as much as we can, then we do it, and we accept that there are inherent risks. We understand them. We write them down. We all agree that those are risks, and we'll watch them. But that it shouldn't stop us from innovating. And I think this is one of the problems. We need ballsy executives that say, okay, screw all that, but also on a government level. Screw all that. We need to make a change. And the only way to make a change is to say, we're just going to do this. We might say sorry afterwards. So that's either someone says, I don't care about the money, I want the innovation. Right? If it's about the money and not about medical safety. And if it's about medical safety, someone that says on a government level or insurance company level or on a hospital level, we'll de-risk it, we'll monitor it, but we will do it at scale to prove that it works or it doesn't work. And I think you'd be shocked if in Switzerland or in Holland or any other European country, we would start doing that. We would see a big shift in healthcare and other fields, but especially in healthcare. And it's one of the big frustrations of doctors, where they have all these great ideas, but they can't cut through the clutter because all these horrible administrative processes, rules and regulations, and some of them are actually really good and in place to protect us, but some of them are, not from this day and time. And that's, I think that's where executives, people in government should understand that they need to make changes in order to allow and create space to do this. Interesting thing is, if you look at the Israeli model of how they're the GPs, the general practitioners, they're all part of an insurance company. So if you're insured at insurance company X, you go to the GP station of insurance company X. The GPs are paid for by the insurance company. So if you want to implement something like this, an insurance company there would actually have a vested interest to do it, because they understand that would relieve the pressure on the doctors in their practices and channel the right customers or patients to either the hospital or the GP practice.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any other countries have that model, but the other thing, if you have state-funded, fully state-funded, and no healthcare and no independent doctors, so everybody's paid for by the government. I think in Spain you have private clinics, but that's the case there. Then you would achieve the same thing. It's a different model, but it's to the same effect. And I think it's something to look at, that those countries where there is a financial incentive or a service incentive or healthcare level incentive, that there's potential there.
Hey, super. I like that. And we definitely shouldn't just accept things are not possible, because the system as it currently is makes it extremely difficult. Difficult it will remain, but either we change the system or we look for pockets where things are, let's say, more flexible or easy to implement.
Yeah, but I see only messages coming around. Everybody says the healthcare system is broken. Everybody's overloaded. I see all these messages, and I understand, and I fully agree. And I speak to a lot of doctors again, and they want the change to happen. It's just that the world around them is not ready to make the change. So it needs to come from inside. And I think at some point, it's sort of contradictory that we say it's broken and the costs are too high, but then we want to implement something that does something to change that. Hey, we can't implement it because rules, regulations, blah, 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 blah. So I think that the actual rules and regulations of our governments, and not just Holland, anywhere, are creating the cost they don't want.
Absolutely. I can give you a very clear example. I know someone that went to the hospital, and I was visiting them, and the doctor came in, and it was the Oberarzt, so the senior guy came in and said, "Yeah, you're looking pretty good. Normally, we would probably send you home, but then we don't earn enough money as a hospital, so we're going to keep you until tomorrow."
Holy moly!
I mean, the fact that he thought that doesn't surprise me. The fact that he said it was, to me, totally shocking. But
Well, it's a business model.
It was the business model. They don't have a choice. We don't, if, we're supposed to keep you in for this number of days to this number of days. And if we don't keep you in long enough, we don't get paid enough. If we keep you in too long, we maybe also don't get paid anymore, but we need to keep you in one more day. And I was just like, wow.
I find that mind-blowing. Sorry.
Mind-blowing. And of course, when you want to change something, who do you ask? Do you ask that doctor? Hey, we'd like to help you send patients home sooner and have them fully monitored and supported? Well, no.
Unless his pay is dependent on how fast he sends patients home. But then you have an incentive the wrong way. He might send patients home that shouldn't be going home.
Yeah. And what is the right regulation? Arguably, we have a least worst regulation, because they keep on changing it to hopefully try and fix, other imperfections in the system. And, you don't want to, let's say, completely redefine it, because you might create more issues than you realize.
Yep.
Was it the law of unintended consequences?
Yep.
But a fascinating piece. I think the medical field is a super interesting space. Look forward to keep on working on it myself. Super exciting to see what's out there and see how quickly some of these changes can be made.
I agree. I'd love to. I'm also working on that, but I'd love to see it change faster. And decision making is incredibly slow. It's extremely frustrating. And by the time they take a decision, already there's new tech. So basically, everything you proposed is like, okay, we can throw it away. We can start all over. So
yeah. Hey, thank you so much. Now, last thought before we close out this podcast for today. One big message that you would like to take away from this entire conversation and just have it as the final thought for people to hear.
Ooh, good question. We had some interesting thoughts and ideas passing by. Well, what I would say to either conversation designers or companies that want to start or are thinking about chatbot or a digital human, I think the most important message is de-risk it, make it small, start small, and build on that. If you start too big, it's usually going to fail. And then you've ruined all the credits you have or the budget you have with executive level. That's it on the one hand, and on the other hand, I would. We touched a little bit on that, but I would stress for executive level that they need more and a better understanding of the actual possibilities and the incredible use cases and business cases you could create long term. It's not short term, but long term to create better productivity, higher quality, more satisfied customers, more satisfied employees, for that matter. So because the mundane tasks would be done by either a chatbot or a digital human. And I think I'm not sure how, but we need to educate executives, or they need to educate themselves how to manage these kind of projects and how to understand them properly, so they integrate that into their strategies. And for that matter, also for communication managers or marketing managers, they have to understand these are also marketing channels or communication channels. They need to be integrated in communication and marketing strategies. And that's also a new thing. You don't see that happen. I'm sorry to say that. And so there's a lot of work to be done there. So we need the visionaries out there in the big corporations that give the proper example and get on a podium and on a stage and start talking. So and spread the message. That would be my advice.
Hey, great last words. Thank you very much, Doron, and looking forward to our next chat, either on another podcast sometime or over a beer sometime soon in the Netherlands. Cheers.
Or in Switzerland.
With pleasure.
This was the Real Digital Humans podcast. Please like, follow or subscribe to hear more.